In a world filled with minor industrial accidents, few are as terrifying as the accidents on oil rigs in the middle of the ocean. These are some of the most incredible accidents involving oil rigs at sea. You may have already seen these as individual stories on this channel, so use the chapters in the description below to navigate these stories in this compilation.
Explosion and fire on the Piper platform. All personnel abandoned. Bloody hell, it's already on fire, isn't it?
On the 6th of July 1988, Piper Alpha oil platform explodes and sinks into the North Sea, killing 165 men in what can almost be described as a reasonable sequence of events. In the early 70s, a group of 4 companies collaborate on an exploration to find oil in the North Sea. In 1972, they get an exploration license, and in 1973, they discover the Piper oil field. The 4 companies form a joint venture called Occidental Petroleum Company Limited, OPCL, and start work to construct the Piper Alpha oil platform and the pipelines to carry oil to the Flotter oil terminal on the Orkney Islands, which will receive and process the oil. The Piper Alpha platform is constructed by McDermott Engineering and Union Industrial Enterprise in 4 modules separated by firewalls. In 1975, the modules are joined together at McDermott's site in Ardersier in Scotland, then floated out to the Piper oil field, which sits in 475 feet of water. Module A is the drilling module. On the opposite side of the platform is Module D, the living quarters. The modules are organized so that high-risk activities are furthest from the crew facilities like living quarters and the control room. In 1976, oil production starts producing 250,000 barrels of oil per day and increases to 300,000 barrels a day under Phase 1 production, which is limited to oil only. Piper Alpha is the central oil platform. The main oil pipeline runs from Piper Alpha to Flotter. The Claymore platform pumps oil into the main pipeline 20 miles west of Piper Alpha. The Tartan platform pumps oil to the main line via Claymore. This means Piper Alpha pipes its own oil while Tartan joins the pipe at Claymore. Piper Alpha is one of the heaviest oil platforms operating in the North Sea. In 1978, major reconstruction is started in order to comply with UK gas conservation requirements to capture gas which is usually flared or burned off as a byproduct of oil extraction. By the end of 1980, a gas conservation module has been installed in Module B and C between the control room and the drilling well in order to capture gas and transport it to St Fergus north of Aberdeen in Scotland. The gas compression and control room are separated by a firewall. Gas and oil are produced in what is termed Phase 2 production. Both Tartan and Claymore pump gas to Piper Alpha, which in turn pumps all the gas to the MCP1 gas compressing platform 30 miles northwest of Piper Alpha and on to St Fergus on the mainland. Phase 2 production of oil and gas continues well into the 80s. By the late 80s, major reconstruction and maintenance is planned. In July 1988, 6 major projects are underway, including replacing the gas conservation module. OPCL initially planned to reroute gas from Tartan and Claymore, then shut Piper Alpha down entirely while the reconstruction was underway. But in order to keep up with production, they found reasonable safety measures. Throughout the refit, they continued to produce 120,000 barrels of oil a day. In order to replace the gas conservation module on Piper Alpha, the platform returns to Phase 1 production where it produces oil and flares gas. The gas conservation module is removed. Gas from the Tartan and Claymore platforms is still routed via Piper Alpha. At 1200 on the 6th of July 1988, 2 condensate pumps A and B are separating condensate from gas so they can be processed further at different plants. Condensate is a light form of crude oil that separates from gas during the change of pressure and temperature between the well under the sea and the platform. Pump A gets shut down for biannual inspection and service. First, several meters away on the same pipeline, the pressure safety valve will be inspected and serviced. An engineer removes the pressure safety valve. The open condensate pipe is temporarily sealed with a disc cover, which is a flat metal disc. The cover is hand tightened so the safety valve can easily be replaced after its service. At 17:55, the inspection and service are not yet complete. At the end of his shift, the engineer fills in a permit which states pump A is not ready and must not be switched on under any circumstances. At 1800, the day shift ends and the night shift starts. 62 men now run Piper Alpha, while 164 men eat, sleep, and try to relax in the living quarters. The shift manager is busy, so the engineer puts the permit in the relevant equipment box and leaves without discussing the loose-fitting flange. At 1800, there's also a change of shift for Piper Alpha's divers. The divers enter the water below the labyrinth of pipes. When they start their shift, they go down a steel staircase and kit up on a steel staging area. The staging area is under the oil processing platform Module B, which can become slippery. To combat this, the metal staging area has holes punched into it. These holes perform two functions. The raised edges give workers grip when walking around the structure, and they allow any oil drips to fall through rather than pool, which would be a hazard. The divers need to remove their work boots and then get into their dry suits. But these punched holes are sharp, which is good for grip but not pleasant to stand on barefoot. So the divers make a reasonable decision to set up a rubber mat. They kit up and enter the water at 1900. Piper Alpha has an automatic fire suppression system. If a fire is detected, the system will automatically start the diesel pumps. These diesel pumps can pull huge amounts of seawater from 120 feet below the waterline. A network of pipes then spray the decks to douse any flames. When divers are in the water, the fire suppression system is put under manual control. If the pumps are turned on automatically and a diver is near the intake at 120 feet, the divers would possibly be sucked against the intake cage and at best pinned until the pumps are turned off or crushed by the water rushing to fill the intake pipe. The procedure at Claymore platform is to keep the automatic system on while divers are in the water unless they're working within 10 to 15 feet of the intake pipe, in which case, like Piper Alpha, they would turn off the automatic system and operate in manual mode in the event of a fire. Health and safety inspectors have recommended Piper Alpha adopt the same procedure, but with all the reconstruction and maintenance going on, the decision is taken to implement that later. On the 6th of July 1988, the divers are not working near any intake pipes. Further up the pipeline, methane ice is causing a blockage which automatically shuts down pump B at 2145 to prevent pressure building up in the pipeline, and engineers can't restart it. The engineers speak with the shift manager to find out if they can start pump A. He reads the work permit for pump A and sees that the scheduled inspection and service has not yet started. Pump A is functional, and much like moving your car's annual service from one day to the next, it's reasonable to postpone the inspection and start pump A in order to relieve pressure on the pipeline while they clear the blockage. But the permit for servicing the safety valve on the same pipeline is stored in a different equipment box because the pump and safety valve are in different locations, and so he doesn't see the instruction not to start pump A under any circumstances. Under pressure to get the pipeline flowing and narrowly focusing on pump A in one location, the shift manager gives the okay to start pump A, not knowing that the safety valve plate is only hand tight. In fact, because the safety valve is several meters away and on a different level, the engineers don't see that the safety valve has been removed. At 2152, pump A is started. Condensate flows into the pipe, and almost immediately the engineers hear a high-pitched sound as gas leaks through the hand-tight metal disc covering the safety valve position. Localized gas alarms sound out, and men on the platform quickly search out the source of the leak. At 2155, the volatile condensate ignites and an explosion blows through the firewall separating the gas conservation module and the control center. The control room is almost destroyed and several key personnel are killed in the explosion. Jeff Bollins, a shift manager, survives the blast and pushes the emergency shutdown button, immediately closing the major valves which stop all gas and oil extraction. He then escapes the area with other able-bodied men. Debris from the explosion ruptures a small condensate pipe which ignites in the flame of the explosion. No alarm is activated in Module D, the living quarters of the platform, and because the control center has been destroyed, nobody is giving or receiving instructions to evacuate. Operators at Tartan and Claymore can see that something is wrong by the explosions lighting the sky 20 miles away, but they continue to pump oil and gas because they don't have the authority to shut down production, which could take days to get back online. At 22:04, radio operator David Kinraid sends out a mayday call.
Mayday. Explosion and fire on the Piper platform. All personnel abandoned.
At 22:05, Aberdeen Coast Guard Station dispatches a Sea King helicopter Rescue 138 from Lossiemouth Search and Rescue Station. The Royal Air Force dispatch a Hawker Siddeley Nimrod from their base at Kinloss to act as the on-scene commander Rescue 1. Support vessels in the North Sea hear the mayday and stand by to act as search and rescue vessels or floating hospitals. At 22:06 in Module B, a crude oil storage tank ruptures from the heat. The area is quickly flooded by oil which ignites and billows out a black plume of smoke. The burning oil drips down onto the divers' staging platform and starts to pool on the rubber mat they've installed. The pooling fire grows until 22:20 when it burns through the tartan pipeline, which explosively ruptures, fueling the inferno with almost 30 tons of gas per second. Sailors in ships as far as a mile away feel the explosion ripple through the air. At 22:30, the Tharos support vessel draws alongside Piper Alpha. She operates as a multifunctional ship including accommodation, a hospital, saturation dive team, search and rescue facilities, and high-pressure water cannon. She uses her water cannon where possible, but it's too powerful to spray at full force, which could injure or kill anyone hit by the high-pressure water. A triage and reception area is set up on the vessel's helideck, staffed by an offshore medic and assisted by diver paramedics from the Tharos saturation diving team. The Sandhaven support vessel arrives on scene and deploys a fast search and rescue boat to find survivors in the water. At 22:50, the pipeline leading to the MCP-1 gas platform fails and explodes. The expanding gas pours back out of the pipeline and sprays flames over 300 feet into the air. The Sandhaven's fast rescue boat is trapped by debris from the explosion. Piper Alpha's steel structure starts to melt and the Tharos is forced to retreat from the heat of the flames. The Claymore platform stops pumping to Piper Alpha, but the 20-mile pipeline still holds a backlog of high-pressure condensate and gas. Men on Piper Alpha are either jumping from the platform into the freezing waters of the North Sea, or they're trapped in the living quarters, Module D, which is filling with black smoke. Mark Reed thinks of his 14-week-old baby boy as he jumps 175 feet from the helideck. At 23:18, the Claymore gas line ruptures and explodes. The backlog of pressure in the pipeline now joins gas from the tartan pipeline to fuel the fire for hours to come. At 23:35, the Sea King helicopter Rescue 138 from Lossiemouth arrives at the scene, and the logistics of moving survivors and key personnel between ships and hospital on the mainland gets underway. Non-essential personnel are removed from the scene and replaced with paramedics from other platforms and ships. At 23:50, in the space of 2 hours since the first ignition from Pump A safety valve, the structure starts to collapse. The fire, fueled by the gas pipes rising out of the sea from under Piper Alpha, has been burning at over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. It's melted the bottom of the structure, and now the infrastructure starts to crumble into the ocean. Then Module D, the living quarters, slips below the waterline with almost 100 men waiting for the signal to evacuate. The Sandhaven's trapped search and rescue vessel is pulled into the sinking structure. 2 of the boat's crew are killed, along with 6 Piper Alpha crew they had already rescued from the water. The skipper is the only man to survive. By 45 minutes past midnight, the drilling Module A is all that remains. Over the next hours, search and rescue boats and helicopters locate survivors and bodies. At 7:25, the last survivors are flown to hospital in Aberdeen. 167 men died, 61 survived. 30 bodies were never recovered. It takes a specialist firefighting team 3 weeks to extinguish the fire. In late 1988, a saturation dive team recovered the living quarters Module D from 475 feet of water, along with the bodies of 87 men trapped inside. While it's not reasonable to expect an outcome like this, the decisions made along the way were reasonable decisions. While those decisions remained isolated, Piper Alpha operated in relative safety. But when those decisions lined up, they created a deadly sequence of events. Ocean-going oil platforms are designed to withstand the most severe weather conditions. In the middle of the ocean, hundreds of miles from land, the crew of the Ocean Ranger put their faith in the technology and integrity of the oil rig. But when poor training, bad design, and extreme weather conditions line up, not even their faith can save them. The Ocean Ranger is a self-propelled, semi-submersible offshore drilling rig working in an area called the Grand Banks. It's owned by an American company, Ocean Drilling and Exploration, or ODECO for short. It's chartered to Mobil Oil Canada, who own the drilling rights for Hibernia oil field. Mobil Oil Canada is a subsidiary of the American company Mobil Corporation. At the time it's built, it's the world's largest semi-submersible platform. The rig weighs almost 25,000 tons. It's 396 feet long, 362 feet wide, and 337 feet high, making it as high as a 30-story building. Of course, when it's floating, almost a third of that is below the waterline. It floats on two 400-foot-long pontoons that lie 80 feet below the waterline. These pontoons have ballast tank compartments that can be partially filled with seawater. This helps to stabilize the rig in rough seas. It's capable of drilling in ocean depths of 1,500 feet. The Grand Banks lie in the North Atlantic Ocean, 166 miles east of St. John's, Newfoundland in Canada. It's known for its rich oil and gas reserves. It's also known for its severe weather conditions, particularly in winter. And the ocean depths in the area range from 100 feet to 600 feet. On the morning of the 14th of February 1982, 84 crew members aboard the Ocean Ranger receive weather forecasts that predicts a severe winter storm is rapidly approaching the Grand Banks. The storm is linked to a major Atlantic cyclone. This time of year, the region is often subjected to extreme weather events, and this incoming storm is forecast to be particularly powerful. The Ocean Ranger is designed to weather such an extreme storm. The rig's previously withstood harsh conditions, leading the crew and the rig's operators to have confidence in its ability to handle this storm. The crew of the Ocean Ranger start to prepare for the severe weather. Standard procedures involve securing any loose equipment, checking that all weather-tight doors and portholes are sealed, and ensuring the stability of the rig by managing its ballast tanks. The ballast control system is critical in maintaining the rig's stability. It regulates the amount of water in the ballast tanks located beneath the rig, allowing the rig to adjust its buoyancy and stability in response to the sea conditions. In preparation for the storm, the crew check the system thoroughly. Even though they start making these necessary precautions, there's no immediate cause for concern. They know the rig's weathered these storms before. Despite the expected severity of this storm, regular operations on the rig continue. As the evening sets in, the storm reaches the Ocean Ranger. High winds and towering waves dwarf the immense size of the Ocean Ranger. It's designed to handle winds up to 100 knots and waves up to 110 feet high. But this storm is proving to be extraordinarily powerful, with waves that go beyond the rig's calculated limits. At 1900, a rogue wave hits a nearby rig, the Sedco 706, which is also operated by Mobil. The wave damages deck gear and washes away a lifeboat. Despite the deteriorating weather and increasing sea state, the Ocean Ranger continues its drilling operations. The crew have faith in the rig. And the culture of the offshore industry is that interruptions to operations are avoided at all costs. However, the conditions are becoming challenging. The crew have to navigate the rig in the stormy weather, working to keep everything running smoothly and safely. This requires constant monitoring of the rig's systems, especially the ballast control system that is crucial to maintaining the rig's stability in the turbulent sea. Communication with the shore also continues, reporting on the rig's status and the evolving situation. This commitment to continuing operations in spite of the declining weather conditions goes to show the level of confidence they have in the Ocean Ranger's design and capabilities, or perhaps their fear of reprisals for abandoning their station. 55 to 65 foot waves batter the Ocean Ranger. A rogue wave slams into the Ranger just past midnight. This rogue wave is significantly larger than other waves in the storm, which are already pushing the Ranger to its calculated limits. The wave strikes with such force that it shatters the glass of a porthole window in the ballast control room, the nerve center responsible for maintaining the rig's stability. The porthole is only 25 feet above the waterline. With each subsequent wave, seawater pours into the room through the broken porthole. This room is filled with the electronic equipment and control panels that control the ballast tank systems. With seawater flooding the control center, systems start to malfunction almost immediately. The seawater causes significant electrical shorts within the system, leading to the malfunction of key components in the ballast control system. At 2100, the SEDCO 706 radio operator picks up radio communication on the Ocean Ranger describing how valves on Ocean Ranger's ballast systems appear to be opening and closing on their own. The crew can't control the rig's list and trim, and it becomes progressively more unstable. While the crew try to manually control the ballast, the storm gets worse and more seawater pours into the control center. Without the ability to properly control the ballast tanks, the rig starts to list or tilt towards the front of the rig. This means that as the rig rides into the oncoming waves, its bow is riding lower into each subsequent wave, which pushes it further into the water rather than riding up and over the oncoming waves. Water starts to flood the forward chain lockers in the corner support columns. The crew operating the ballast control have several disadvantages. Water is wreaking havoc with the automatic control system, but they don't have the proper training to know how to manually control the system. They don't even have a manual to look up how to override the automatic system and take manual control. That might not matter anyway. As the bow dips, it forces the stern higher out of the water. The ballast control pumps are in the stern of the vessel. As the bow sinks and the stern rises, the ballast pumps don't have the power to pump water up such a long incline and out at the stern. The degree of listing increases with every passing hour. The crew begin to implement emergency procedures. These are sets of predefined actions designed to regain control over the rig's stability and prevent a complete disaster. They unsuccessfully try to manually control the ballast tanks. They halt all drilling operations and prepare for a potential evacuation. They shut down all non-essential systems and operations on the rig in order to focus all resources on crisis management. They shear the drill string and cut away from the blowout preventer, something the Deepwater Horizon wasn't able to do. I'll leave a link to that video here. While the crew are experienced and they've been trained for emergency situations, the combination of a severe storm, malfunctioning equipment, and a listing rig creates an exceptionally challenging and dangerous situation. At 0052, the Ocean Ranger makes a mayday call. Standby support vessel Seaforth Highlander is requested to come in close. Countermeasures against the 10 to 15 degree list are proving ineffective. Canadian Coast Guard and mobile operated helicopters are alerted just after 0100. Hospitals in St. John's are put on standby. The support vessels Bolton-Tor and Norditor, the standby vessels of SEDCO 706 and Zapata Ugland, are sequestered by the Canadian Coast Guard to provide assistance. In an emergency situation, Coast Guards have the right to take control of a vessel at sea in order to assist in an emergency. I've been sequestered in the waters around Cape Town when a small boat lost its engines. The Coast Guard directed my crew and I to the area, but by the time we got there, another larger vessel arrived on the scene who was more capable of assisting than the sailboat I was in. The support vessels approaching the Ocean Ranger are experiencing the same winter storm as the Ocean Ranger. High winds, rough seas, and poor visibility create dangerous conditions that limit the ability of the rescue teams to reach the Ranger. They must navigate through the violent storm, reach the increasingly unstable Ocean Ranger, and then evacuate the crew in extremely challenging conditions. Every minute counts. At 01:30, Ocean Ranger transmits its last message. There will be no further radio communications from the Ocean Ranger. We are going to lifeboat stations. Abandoning any boat in the ocean is a big decision. Today, the rule of thumb is that you step up onto your life raft, which means your boat has already sunk beneath you. But to evacuate an offshore oil rig adds several dimensions of complexity. Gathering essential survival gear, ensuring all crew members have life jackets, and readying the lifeboats for evacuation, all while the rig is tilting. Abandoning the rig is a last resort for the crew. It means leaving the perceived safety of the rig and facing the harsh elements of the storm in a lifeboat. It must be terrifying to climb off a huge vessel that's been destroyed by the storm and climb into a tiny boat that, by comparison, is the size of a bathtub. These preparations are taking place amidst rising panic and confusion, with the crew acutely aware that their lives hang in the balance. Lifeboats are designed to be launched even in extreme conditions, but the severe list of the Ocean Ranger makes it extremely difficult. The crew struggle to launch them against the tilt of the rig, the intense wind, and the monstrous waves. The rig's lifeboats are designed to use a gravity drop system, and so the rig needs to be relatively level for them to launch. The crew managed to launch at least one lifeboat. The Seaforth Highlander support vessel arrives on the scene. They can see bodies floating in the water. A lifeboat with 8 or 9 men approaches them. The lifeboat steams across the stern and pulls alongside their port quarter. The Seaforth is able to throw lines to the life raft. Before they can bring anyone on board, the life raft is battered against the hull of the Seaforth Highlander and collapses. The men in the water cling to the lifeboat, which remains overturned. The Seaforth fights its way through the swell and wind to reach the men. They slowly succumb to the cold. Only one man is seen wearing an orange survival suit. The Seaforth maneuvers into position and narrowly misses chopping him up in its propellers. The crew on deck throw a grappling hook to try and pull the man onto the boat. It hooks his life jacket, but the man slips below the waterline. It's simply not possible to pull men from the water in such rough conditions, with the equipment and deck setup they have. Rescue teams from the Coast Guard, merchant vessels, supply boats from other oil rigs, aircraft, and helicopters descend on the scene. Rescue workers battle against towering waves, freezing temperatures, and powerful winds as they search for survivors. At 02:30, the first rescue helicopter arrives on the scene. Captain Mike Clark, the pilot of the search and rescue helicopter from Gander, lowers search and rescue technician Master Corporal Randy Brown from a 24-meter cable into the freezing water and howling gale to try and retrieve the first man they see. He's already dead. Snow and waves estimated at 16 meters make their efforts impossible. It's the first and last airborne rescue attempt. The conditions are too dangerous. Flying over the search area, rescue helicopters fight against winds approaching 90 miles an hour. The heavy seas make body recovery impossible. Captain Clark instead tries to guide the support vessels to bodies in the water. It quickly becomes clear that the supply ships are having to fight for their own survival. Sending men out on deck to recover bodies is a suicide mission. A rescue helicopter lands for refueling on another rig. The rig is pitching violently in the heavy seas. The helicopter crew becomes seasick to the point they have to abandon the refueling and return to their base on land. The rig's severe list deteriorates until it reaches a critical point where the rig is no longer stable. At 03:13, the Ocean Ranger capsizes and sinks below the waterline. The search and rescue operation turns into a recovery operation. In the days that follow, debris and personal effects from the Ocean Ranger wash up on the Newfoundland coast. Even though hospitals in St. John's are on standby, not one patient from the Ocean Ranger is admitted. All 84 crew members aboard the Ocean Ranger are lost. Only 22 bodies of the 84 crew are recovered. They're brought to Pier 17 in St. John's Harbour. Newspaper reporters are held back so that no photographs can be taken. A Russian trawler, Mechanic Tarasov, sinks in the same storm. The bodies of the Russian seamen are brought to the same pier. Off-duty Ocean Ranger crew members were asked to check the Russian bodies to make sure no men from the Ocean Ranger were accidentally sent to Russia. After the storm has passed, sonar and underwater ROVs are used to locate the wreckage of the Ocean Ranger on the sea floor. The rig lies in water around 100 feet deep. It's decided that this shallow depth poses a hazard for marine traffic, and so the rig will be refloated and sunk in deeper water. A European company is given the contract to salvage the rig. During these operations, 2 divers are sent to recover fuel from tanks in the pontoon. They cut into the pontoon using a cutting torch. Gases from the fuel ignites, creating an explosion, killing the 2 divers. Another diver is killed a week later when a large piece of metal debris falls from the salvage ship and crushes him against the sunken rig, bringing the total death toll of the Ocean Ranger to 87 men. In the worst disasters, disbelief, complex decision-making, and indecision lead to lost time that always gives the unfolding events the upper hand. On the 20th of April 2010, while drilling at the Macondo prospect, an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig kills 11 crewmen and ignites a fireball visible 40 miles away. 2 days later, the rig sinks below the waterline, leaving behind the largest marine oil spill in history. Deepwater Horizon is an ultra-deepwater, dynamically positioned semi-submersible offshore drilling rig. The rig is capable of drilling oil wells in water as deep as 8,000 feet. Her high-tech dynamic positioning system uses 8 azimuth thrusters. Each azimuth thruster can rotate 360 degrees to hold her in a stable position 24/7. Each of her legs fills with seawater to act as ballast, stabilizing her in rough seas. She's owned by Swiss company Transocean and operated by BP, which leases the rig at a cost of $496,800 a day. BP then staff the rig, provide gear for the drilling, and contract support vessels to keep it operational, adding an additional $500,000 a day. At almost $1 million a day to drill an oil well, you could say the pressure is on to drill a new well as quickly as possible and move to the more important work of pumping and selling the oil. She's also equipped with eDrill, which transmits real-time drilling data to technical personnel in Houston, Texas. Deepwater Horizon drills wells in the Atlantis and Thunder Horse oil fields. She's considered a powerful rig with an exemplary safety record. In September 2009, the rig drills the deepest oil well in history at a vertical depth of 35,000 feet in the Tiber oil field at Keithley Canyon, approximately 250 miles southeast of Houston. During its lifetime, the rig's in operation for 93% of its working days. The rest of the time is spent moving between sites or undergoing regular maintenance. She measures 367 feet by 256 feet. The drilling deck is nearly as big as a football field. Her drilling derrick reaches 320 feet into the air and has 2 cranes alongside. Once stabilized, she reaches a depth of 136 feet. Below deck are living quarters for up to 146 people with amenities like a gym and movie theater. The crew refer to her as a floating Hilton. She's fitted with the latest technology in blowout prevention. A blowout is when high-pressure oil or gas escapes unchecked. An accidental spark during a blowout could create a catastrophic fire. She can divert oil and gas and seal off, then break free from the well if there's a blowout. She has systems to prevent explosions and alarms to warn the crew. The crew regularly practice responding to emergencies, and she has experienced leaders. They've got a 400-ton blowout preventer at the seabed with several different methods to shut off the well in an emergency. The most extreme is a powerful set of hydraulic shears that can cut through the drill pipe, seal the well, and disconnect the horizon from the well. This system is called EDS, or Emergency Disconnect System. A red button in the drill shack and the bridge activates the shears, but Transocean's Well Control Handbook says they should only be used in exceptional circumstances. That might not matter because Transocean doesn't perform an expensive 90-day maintenance inspection that the manufacturer said should be done every 3 to 5 years. Industry standards and federal regulations say the same thing. BP and a Transocean safety consultant point out that the Horizon's blowout preventer, a decade old, is past due for inspection. Transocean decides its regular maintenance program is adequate for the time being. In February 2010, the Deepwater Horizon begins drilling at the Macondo prospect off the coast of Louisiana. The prospect is owned by BP, Anadarko Petroleum, and Moex Offshore. On the morning of April 20th, the drilling crew gather to discuss the day with their bosses. The main task for the day is finishing the well from hell. The Macondo well is behind schedule, and Deepwater Horizon is sent to get it back on track. Between February and April, the Horizon drills rapidly, which is welcome news for the crew whose bonuses are tied to meeting schedules. Drilling quickly increases risk. The Horizon faces powerful and unpredictable geological forces. Rapidly pushing into a high-pressure oil and gas reserve 3 miles deep is risky. The Gulf of Mexico has unstable and porous formations, making it even more challenging. Heavy drilling fluid known as mud keeps disappearing into cracks in the rock formation. Mud is pumped into the drilling well to lubricate the drill head and stabilize the well. The mud then circulates back up the well pipe, carrying rock up and out of the well to the Horizon. On the drilling rig, the rock is separated from the mud, which is then pumped back down to repeat the process. Losing mud into the porous rock formation reduces the weight bearing down on the surging oil and gas, causing violent kicks of pressure that make it difficult to control the well. Some weeks earlier, a particularly bad kick had left millions of dollars worth of drilling tools stuck in the well. Operations were halted for 9 days while gas continued to filter up. In the rig's office known as the Drill Shack, 2 BP executives and 2 senior Transocean officials are meeting with Jimmy Harrell, the rig's manager. They've flown out to praise the crew's safety performance and to discuss the Horizon's busy schedule. The rig has to finish the Macondo well and complete several repairs before starting 2 other high-priority projects for BP. The executives want to keep the Horizon on schedule. Bonuses are based on saving money and meeting deadlines. BP denies pressurizing the Horizon's crew to cut corners, but its plans for completing the well keep changing in ways that save time and increase risk. By early evening, one crucial test remains before the Horizon can plug the Macondo and move on. During the negative pressure test, the crew will withdraw the heavy mud from the well and replace it with lighter seawater to see if pressure builds up in the pipeline. If it does, it could mean oil and gas are seeping into the pipe. There are no industry standards or government rules. BP's instructions for the test are 24 words long. The BP executives and drilling crew work out the engineering but disagree over the test results. During the test, pressure builds up and Wyman Wheeler, who's in charge of drilling operations, is worried. A BP executive thinks the test went fine and rig managers debate whether to repeat the test. By 2000, the test has been repeated and everyone agrees the Macondo well is stable. In a few hours, the drilling crew's 21-day working tour will be over and a new crew will join the rig. Joseph Keith is monitoring the blowout gauges. He's never seen so much activity while sealing a well in his 7 years on the Horizon. This makes him uncomfortable. So many jobs happening simultaneously could throw off his instruments, but he doesn't tell anyone he's worried about monitoring the well. By 2050, the drilling crew are pumping mud out of the well to prepare for plugging it. This reduces the weight bearing down on the oil and gas. Mr. Easel, who's in charge of drilling, has been up for nearly 18 hours. He checks in one last time with the team for any lingering doubts about the final tests. They assure him everything is good and tell him to get some sleep. At 21:38, oil and gas passes through the Horizon's 5-story blowout preventer at the seabed. The blowout preventer is a fail-safe device, but once the oil and gas gets past the blowout preventer, nothing stops it from racing up the 5,000-foot riser pipe to the rig. Drilling mud gushes up and sprays from the well like a water fountain. A floor hand on an upper deck sees the rush of oily mud and his training kicks in. He looks around for help to install a special valve on the drill pipe which will suppress the blowout. But he quickly realizes there's no floor hands on the drilling floor to respond. Everyone is hurriedly preparing the rig so they can seal the well and head home. Mud and water is bouncing off the derrick in every direction with incredible force. The blowout sounds like a jet engine, a shrill, whining howl. Now the floor hand from the upper deck makes his way to the drilling floor. He's instantly soaked, his protective glasses coated in mud. A crane operator sees the mud subside for a moment. He thinks the drilling crew has it under control, but then it erupts again, even louder than before. A smoky haze of gas sprays from a pipe high up on the derrick. The Horizon has two ways to defend against oil and gas surging to the rig. The drilling crew can turn a valve and divert the blowout out to sea, or it can contain it on the rig by funneling it into a device called a mud gas separator. The mud separator is preferred for smaller kicks because it avoids any cleanup and the investigation into an oil spill. The drilling team are now working to control the blowout using the mud separator. It's quickly overwhelmed. A gas cloud spreads over the aft deck. The Horizon's 6 main diesel engines are fed by air intakes above the deck. If the engines begin to take in air mixed with gas, they run the risk of speeding up to the point of breaking apart. The engine control room is situated in the middle of 6 main engines. A computer console in the engine control room lights up, warning that sensors have detected gas somewhere on the rig. Up on the bridge, the crew feels a jolt. Kurt Kuchter, the 34-year-old captain of the vessel, senses something is wrong. There's a high-pitched hissing. On the CCTV, they can see mud flying into the ocean. Gas alarms start lighting up across the computer console in the control room. Gas is spreading over the rig from the drilling floor to the main deck. The lights are all magenta, signaling extremely high levels of combustible gas. The alarm system relies on dozens of sensors strategically placed all over the Horizon. When a sensor detects fire or gas, a corresponding alarm lights up on computer consoles, not just on the bridge, but also in the 2 other crucial parts of the rig, the drill shack and the engine control room. In theory, this means anyone in the 3 critical locations can respond swiftly to the first sign of trouble. This system is designed to automatically trigger the general master alarm to signal the evacuation of the rig if it detects high levels of gas. Transocean has removed this automatic feature and set the general master alarm to be activated manually. The change has the Coast Guard's blessing, but concerns have been raised by the crew about the safety of the setup. Transocean didn't want people to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a false alarm. A young bridge officer, Andrea Fleitas, is on watch with her boss, Yancy Keplinger, the senior officer in charge of dynamic positioning. She's been trained to raise the alarm and she knows they can also activate the emergency shutdown system, but she hasn't been trained to use the system. The emergency shutdown system would shut down ventilation fans to inhibit gas flow, turn off electrical equipment and limit ignition sources, and even shut down the engines. This is different from the emergency disconnect system. On the bridge, they don't activate any of these emergency response systems. Horizon's emergency shutdown system relies on human judgment. Transocean has been warned that crew members need to act quickly and correctly under stress, which makes the shutdown system vulnerable. A safety consultant has previously urged Transocean to change the system so human input is not critical for success. Transocean disagrees and says an automatic system is less safe. Most crew members know nothing about the unfolding emergency. They're sleeping, watching television, calling home and posting on Facebook, while a fine mist of gas envelops the drilling floor. The floor hands fighting the blowout can feel and taste it. Mr. Easel, who's in charge of drilling, is woken 15 minutes into his much-needed sleep by a call from the drilling deck. They're trying to fill in the well, but they need help. On his way through the hall, he passes one of the Transocean executives who wants to know what's going on. He doesn't respond. The drillers have had the foresight to turn off the pumps removing mud from the well, but they hold off on plugging it. They know they've still got the 400-ton blowout preventer with its powerful set of hydraulic shears to cut through the drill pipe and seal the well, but they would prefer someone else makes that decision. Then drilling fluids begin cascading onto the ship Damon B. Bankston, a 260-foot work vessel moored to the Horizon. The Bankston's captain radios the Horizon's bridge and is told to move to a safe distance. Men in the engine control room overhear the conversation with the Bankston on their radios. They have access to the emergency shutdown system. If they lift a plastic cover and hit a button, the engines will shut down in seconds, but nobody has raised the alarm. They've been told there's a well-controlled situation, but they have no reason to believe it's anything more than a routine kick. They don't know that highly explosive gas is gathering overhead. There's a risk in overreacting. If they kill the engines, the horizon will drift from its position over the well, possibly damaging the drilling equipment and forcing costly delays. In any event, they don't believe they have the authority to hit the emergency shutdown. The practice is to wait and listen for instructions from the bridge. In fact, there are no communications or coordination among the bridge, the drill shack, and the engine control room. The men in the engine control room do nothing. Emergency lights flicker on their console. Someone has triggered an emergency shutdown of the electrical and ventilation systems near the drilling floor. The bridge and the engine control room haven't hit the emergency shutdown. The men in the drilling shack have activated a system to prevent an explosion on the drilling floor, but that system doesn't affect the engines or the wider ventilation systems. 2 of the rig's 6 engines are running, engine 3 and 6. They're beginning to accelerate. They spin into a high-pitched whine. A safety device, the Rig Saver, should shut down the engines if they run too fast, but the high pitch keeps climbing. In the electronics shop next door, a computer monitor explodes. Then light bulbs begin popping one by one. Men on the drill deck are now jumping over pipes and running for the stairs that will take them down off the main deck. All the lights go out, throwing them into darkness. They turn down the stairs when they're hit by an explosion. Engine 3 has exploded. The engine control room and the electronics shop are nearest the blast. The first explosion blows the door off the electronics shop, hitting a technician in the head. Blood streams down his face. He clenches a penlight in his mouth and begins crawling. He reaches another door, but he's blown 30 feet back by a second blast. Engine 6. He begins crawling again. He climbs across 2 men in the engine control room. He assumes they're dead because they don't respond. He makes it to the lifeboat deck just outside the engine control room. The structure near engine 3 has been blown away, but the 2 lifeboats are intact. They're meant to hold 73 people. He considers launching one on his own, but instead he decides to offer his help on the bridge. 2 minutes after the first explosion, the bridge crew hits the general master alarm to rouse the sleeping crew. The explosions hit the Horizon crew members who are unaware of the threat. A crew member washing dishes in the galley is knocked out. Another in the laundry is left trapped and battered. A crane operator lays the crane boom in its cradle, then he's engulfed in smoke and flames as he exits the cab and goes down the spiral staircase. The blast wave from the second explosion briefly extinguishes the fire, but also knocks him headfirst to the deck, where he dies in a pool of blood with his head caved in. On the other side of the deck, the second crane operator is blown to the back of his crane cab by the second explosion. A fireball envelops the derrick and wraps around his cabin. Mr. Easel, the drill chief, is blown 20 feet into a bulkhead as he steps into his office. He makes his way on his hands and knees, following a flow of air until he realizes it's gas. He keeps crawling. He has to get out. Crew members make their way to the bridge. The engine control room and the drilling shack are both destroyed, and the bridge is the only control center left standing. They enter to find Captain Kuchta screaming at bridge officer Andrea Fleitas for pushing the Horizon's distress signal. A crew member yells to the captain that the engine control room is gone, and without power there's no way to fight the fire or control the rig. They're on a dead ship. The captain can't seem to compute that information. It's been 9 minutes since mud gushed onto the drilling floor. The captain asks Andrea Fleitas to make an emergency announcement, but she's frozen with fear and says she can't do it. Now, Yancey Keplinger, the senior officer in charge of dynamic positioning, gets on the intercom and calls out, "Fire, fire, fire." There's still one way to keep the Horizon from sinking. They need to activate the Emergency Disconnect System, or EDS, which will signal the blowout preventer to release the Horizon and seal the well. A supervisor responsible for the blowout system yells to the captain that he's hitting the EDS. This is the strongest possible measure left to save the rig, and there's still resistance. Someone says they need Jimmy Harrell, the rig's boss, to approve the use of the EDS. Jimmy Harrell is in the shower when the explosion starts. An explosion rips through his cabin. Glass and insulation are blown through the shower. His eye is injured, so with blood in his face and half blind, he makes his way to the bridge. When he arrives, the captain asks for permission to hit the EDS, which he approves straight away. Now they need to start the standby generators, which would give them enough power to start one of the remaining engines and fight the fires. 3 crew head to the generators, but they can't get them started. That doesn't matter because only one member of the 2 firefighting teams makes it to his fire station after the explosions. It's not clear if poor maintenance is responsible or perhaps the system's been damaged in the explosions, but the emergency disconnect system doesn't work. The Horizon is tethered to a well that they can't seal. There's nothing left for the crew to do but abandon the rig. A mass of dazed men and women make their way to the lifeboats. On the crowded lifeboat deck, they can feel and hear the flames engulfing the derrick. The crew pile into the lifeboats. Men are screaming at the coxswains to launch. The burning derrick might collapse at any moment. Some are crying. Lifeboat number 2 leaves first without many of its assigned passengers. Darren Rupinski, the coxswain for Lifeboat 1, refuses to leave with empty seats. Now, men start jumping from the lifeboat deck into the Gulf. Some lose their footing on the crowded deck and fall into the water. The Gulf water is calm, and those that hit the water are able to swim away from the burning wreckage. Nitrogen tanks burst on the main deck. Both lifeboats leave with at least 10 people still alive on the rig. The 3 crew members who went to start the generators return to the bridge and find the captain, Andrea Fleitas, and Yancey Keplinger are still there. They decide it's time to abandon ship. They find an inflatable life raft, but they have trouble freeing it from the deck, inflating and lowering it. They haven't practiced this during evacuation drills. Small explosions go off around them and intense waves of heat come up from under the rig. They lower the life raft but can't paddle away from the burning rig. Captain Kuchta swims to a rescue boat launched by the Bankston, fetches a knife and returns to cut the raft free. The remaining survivors jump from the heli deck almost 200 feet high. Of 126 crew on board, 11 died, most of them from the drilling crew who were at the epicenter of the flames. Within 36 hours, the Deepwater Horizon slipped beneath the waterline. Oil continued to spill out of the well until it was capped on the 15th of July, almost 3 months after the accident, making it one of the largest oil spills in history. It strikes me that in accidents of this scale, decision-making is compromised by 3 factors. Disbelief that the events unfolding are actually happening, which is a very human response to a traumatic event. The first stage of grief is denial. Training that promotes the least costly remedy as a first resort, which leads to the crew's inability to recognize the severity of a situation, and they have to work out if they're going far enough to stop the situation from escalating. Most of the time, the situation is already 5 steps ahead of them. Now, I'm not an engineer, and so I couldn't say if it's feasible to make a blowout preventer that has only one job, rather than several degrees of decision making. Everyone is trying to avoid pushing the button because the result is so finite. Shears slice the pipe and it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to get back to the start position. Maybe there are some engineers out there who could answer this. Could a blowout preventer be designed to shut the well like a tap that can be turned on just as quickly as it's turned off? Imagine how easily any one of these decisions could be made if the tap could be turned off, a problem resolved without the pressure of time, and then 10 minutes later, it's turned back on. BP and Transocean faced fines and cleanup costs in excess of $20 billion and further undisclosed payouts to those involved in the accident or affected by the oil spill. Analysts show a quarterly gross loss for BP of $17 billion in the months following the accident. By 2011, their annual gross profits bounced back to around $60 billion. On the evening of the 27th of March 1980, a storm in the North Sea with winds gusting up to 45 miles an hour causes 40-foot waves that capsize the Alexander Kielland oil platform, killing 123 men. But was it just the weather that devastated the Kielland? Alexander L. Kielland is a Norwegian offshore semi-submersible drilling rig. The rig is named after Norwegian novelist Alexander Lange Kielland. It's built at a French shipyard as a mobile drilling platform and delivered to Stavanger Drilling in July 1976. It's initially designed as a drilling platform, but there's a shortage of drilling contracts, and so the platform is temporarily repurposed to offer living accommodation for personnel from several nearby rigs. It's used as a floating hotel or flotel for employees on the nearby Edda 2-7C platform. Workers can walk to the flotel through a sea bridge connecting the Edda oil rig to the platform. On the deck, there are shipping container apartments to accommodate up to 348 crew and a drilling derrick. There's a helipad so crew can be transported by helicopter to and from land and other platforms. The platform feels like a bustling airport terminal with helicopters coming and going at all times, day and night. The platform has 5 vertical columns with a height of 115 feet and 28 feet in diameter, which act as pontoons to provide buoyancy for the platform. They can also be partially filled with seawater, which provides stability. The columns are placed at 5 points around the platform like a pentagon, with bracing running between them and the deck. The braces are welded in place using a fillet weld. A fillet weld is a type of weld used to attach a metal plate to another at a 90-degree angle. The welds are subjected to extreme forces from the huge pontoons and braces pulling in different directions. Without this bracing, the structure would be pulled apart by the relentless swell and storms in the North Sea. Fatigue cracks in the fillet weld should be re-welded and maintained over time. The Kielland is 338 feet by 325 feet and weighs over 10,000 tons. The platform has 6 anchors holding the rig in position. In 1978, several new accommodation container blocks are added to the drilling deck of the platform, increasing its total capacity to 386 people. If they get a lucrative drilling contract, these containers are simple to remove. The crew members talk about the platform as one of the greatest in the North Sea. In 1980, the Kielland is contracted to Phillips Petroleum. On the 27th of March 1980, the rig's located 200 miles east of Dundee, Scotland. A storm is approaching and the crew are readying the Edda oil platform for impact. As the storm builds, it knocks out several electrical outputs on the platform. Helicopters are grounded and management decide to evacuate non-essential crew from the Edda to the Kielland. The crew batten down and secure all drilling and manufacturing gear on the deck of the Edda. Non-essential crew and support staff transfer to the Kielland via the sea bridge. The winds are reaching up to 70 miles an hour. 50-foot waves batter the 2 platforms. As the swell rolls through and the winds push against the structure, the welds that secure the support braces are working to withstand the extreme forces. The head count is 212 people on board the Kielland when they remove the sea bridge and disconnect from the Edda. The Alexander Kielland drifts slightly away from the Edda. Crew who transfer to the Kielland find relief in a safe space. They're reading, sleeping or eating in the cafeteria. At 18:30, the crew hear a loud bang which echoes through the rig. They assume it's a huge wave hitting the deck. Then 2 more quickly follow like a loud crack, followed by a trembling that reverberates through the platform. A fatigue crack in a fillet weld gives way and the braces supporting one of the pontoons are pulled apart. As the pontoon is ripped from the platform, the weight shifts in an instant, knocking people off their feet. The crew members can't process what's happening. They can feel the Alexander Kielland is heeling to one side. The platform tilts 40 degrees in seconds. Some men relaxing in their cabins can feel the Kielland start to tilt, but there's no announcement from the control center. They don't know if they should stay in their cabins or make their way to their muster stations. Water seeps into the passageways and men are slipping as they try to navigate the corridors. Crew member Jan Jansen hears men screaming in the corridors and in their cabins. 130 men gather in the designated emergency muster stations located in the mess hall and cinema. Jan Jansen fights his way to the deck to secure the lifeboats. When he reaches the deck, all he can see is the dark, foggy sky. The intense rain and cold wind lashes his face. The heavy waves continue to pound the deck of the rig, causing violent shakes throughout the Kielland. The rig rolls in the swell. The weight of the lifeboats shift and 3 of the 7 on board are washed off the deck in the swell and heavy seas. To secure the 4 remaining lifeboats, Janssen and his colleagues must get to the other side of the platform, which is riding high out of the water. They have to climb the sloping deck of the Kielland. If they slip, below them is the freezing ocean. But even if they make it to the lifeboats, they can't be certain they'll be able to lower them into the sea. They fight their way up the tilting platform. Some men make it up the platform and lower themselves into the lifeboats. But the Kielland continues to tilt. The generators cut out, casting the platform into darkness. Men are stuck inside the accommodation blocks. The angle of the floor is so steep they can't climb out. Chairs and tables are sliding down the floor in pitch black rooms. On the deck, men are climbing the handrails to get to the highest point of the rig. If they stay in position holding the handrails, no ship can reach them. The wind is blowing at 60 to 70 miles an hour with heavy fog engulfing the rig. The rig is now heeling at a 60-degree angle. Reaching a lifeboat seems like the only chance for survival. The only alternative is to take their chances in the freezing North Sea. Those who make it to the lifeboat still face a major problem. A lifeboat is usually deployed using gravity to drop into the ocean. The angle of the tilting rig means the lifeboats don't have a clear path to the sea. Men struggle to release each lifeboat, but 3 are stuck and don't budge. Eventually they manage to release the last lifeboat and there isn't enough space for all the men. With no options left, the remaining crew start to jump from high on the rig. They plunge several feet under the frigid waters with no life jackets or survival suits. As they hit the freezing water, they have to fight their body's impulse to gasp for air or they'll inhale water and drown. Cold water shock sends their heart rate and blood pressure soaring. Crew from the Edda now release the Edda's lifeboats and send out a distress signal. The Alexander Kielland is almost 90 degrees. Men in the water are fighting for their lives. They try to hold their composure long enough to catch their breath. Then they start to swim towards the Edda platform. The upper pontoons of the Alexander Kielland are completely out of the water. The listing rig is acting like a sail caught in the high winds. The first anchor chain snaps under the extreme forces, then another until only one anchor chain remains intact. The men still on the platform are now trapped in a sinking vessel. The wind continues to blow. The final anchor chain holding the Kielland steady snaps a little over 20 minutes after the first support brace breaks free. Without any support, the rig slowly rolls, leaving crew members trapped and fighting for their lives. 30 minutes after the first sound of a cracking fillet weld, the 10,000-ton Alexander Kielland rolls over and is fully inverted. 50 men are trapped under the capsized rig. Crew on board the Edda can see men in the water battling the heavy rain and strong winds. If the men in the sea aren't pulled from the water soon, they'll either drown or freeze to death. One of the Kielland's lifeboats surfaces, but it's upside down. Some men in the water climb onto one side. They use their weight and the waves washing over the lifeboat to flip it right side up. They start to pull their colleagues to the safety of the lifeboat. 19 men. Nobody's prepared for such a devastating disaster. Only a handful of the 212 men on board the Kielland make it to their cabin to retrieve their survival suit. A survival suit is like a dry suit that creates an air gap between your body and the water. 47 vessels, 24 helicopters, and almost 2,000 men responded to the distress signal from the Edda. Only 89 of the 212 crew survive. 123 drown in the frigid waters. The commission appointed to examine the incident found that a fatigue fracture in a support brace on one of the platform's columns was the direct cause. An insufficient weld wasn't picked up during manufacturing, resulting in the formation of a fracture that grew over time.